الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم
مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا
آمين آمين بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. If this is your first time in the Halaqa or you missed the past couple weeks, we were telling a story of this person. His name is Yunus. The story is part fiction, part not fiction, but it has a lot of wisdom in it. And so, just a quick recap, if you forgot the history of it, Yunus, come up here, sit here. Come on up here. Separate. Come here, Yafi. You're the inspiration to the story, so come here. Okay, so if you forgot the story, just a quick recap. There was a judge named Yunus. He made a wrong judgment on somebody, and he decided to leave being a judge and go study with a sheikh. And the reason he did that because he felt he can't really tell the difference between truth and illusions. And the sheikh, while he was with the sheikh, some things happened. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Mu'ad. So while he was with the sheikh, you remember what happened with them? There was some conflict, some guys started plotting against him, and they eventually got him out of the zawiyah, the faqih khana. And then he was out, and there was a crazy person walking around the city, always asking people, do you know the meaning of kalimat tawheed? Remember that? He was always asking people this, and what happens, this person starts seeing the dream about that guy. And in his dream, he sees two armies fighting, and the general of the army of the Muslims looks like that crazy person. And what happens, the person that he had made a bad judgment on back in the case, also he meets up with this person who is a great wali of Allah also, and he had understood the meaning of La ilaha illallah, and all three of them end up having a journey, and they go towards east, and they end up in the desert stuck with a sandstorm, and they pass out, either the camels run away, after some time they wake up where? In a secret village, in the middle of the desert, inside a tent. Okay, so this is where we're going to start. Now, before I continue, I really need you guys to be absolutely silent. Sisters in the back. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman. So, Yunus wakes up. He remembers just a few moments ago, they were in the desert, they were walking in the heat, and they had to stop because the brother that followed them along, who was always asking, do you know the meaning of kalimat tawheed? He was getting sick, and he passed out from the heat. And so they set up tents, and they stayed in the desert, and then sandstorm came, and what happened? When they got out, after the storm was over, their camels were gone. They passed out in the desert out of thirst and hunger. Now that Yunus is awake, he realizes he's no longer in the desert. So he looks around, he's confused where he is, and he turns next to him and he sees his friend Mustafa, who is the blacksmith's son, who was the person that Yunus thought committed murder and was almost going to execute him. Mustafa is sleeping next to him. He's also passed out. Yunus wakes up Mustafa. He says, Mustafa, where are we? Mustafa gets up. He says, I don't know. And while they're having this experience, they hear some people talking outside of the tent. There are two voices. One of them says, why did you bring them here? Don't you know if Beg finds out, it's going to be a big problem for us? He says, I saw them in the desert. I couldn't let them just die. I had to bring them. I had to do something. He says, make sure nobody else finds out. Who else knows that they're here? The other man says, only me and two other people that helped me carry them here. Other than that, he says, just make sure if Beg finds out, his men are going to come down here, and then they stop talking. They say, did you hear that? So what? He says, I think they're awake. Let's go check it out. So one of them enters inside the tent. He sees that the two people are sitting up, awake, and the third one, Mustafa, the one who was asking about kalimat tawheed, he's also stirring now. He's about to wake up, and Yunus asked a question. He says, where are we? He says, my friend, you're far from the city. You're far from the city. How did you guys end up here? What is it? How did you end up here? And Yunus says, we had a dream in which we were told to go east. And so as we kept going, we got stuck in the desert, and this is what happened, and that what happened? Come here, Yunus. Come here, yeah. Please, come here. Excellent. He says, that's how we ended up here, and the man says, you have come at a very bad time. He says, the leader of this village, his name is Baig. He says, Baig is a very, very oppressive, tyrant person. And this village is far in the corners of the desert. It's very hard to get to from many, many different places. So Baig has a lot of bad things coming through here. He's got trained bandits that drop caravans. He's got slaves that he brings in and he ties them up, and we don't have any rides or anything to escape. And the only livelihood that we have is the small amount of food he gives us. And he says, if Baig finds you here, either he's going to execute you and kill you, or he's going to take you as slaves. Yunus is like, oh my God, what have we got ourselves into? Mustafa says, now Mustafa, remember what happened with Mustafa? When he was about to get executed, Yunus, the judge, was sitting there and he said, this man is the murderer, he's the one that's guilty, execute him, and they put the ropes around his neck. Remember what happened to Mustafa? He was about to die. In that moment he realized life means nothing. What really matters is what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when he had that realization was so powerful that from that moment on he had no fear of anything. He was not afraid of anything. So Yunus is thinking, oh my God, this is not good. Mustafa says, Yunus, we are in the land of Allah. Doesn't matter who the leader is, Baig, Shmeig, Pebeig, whatever you call him. He says, Allah is the one in charge. He's the one that brought us here, and I'm sure he brought us here for a reason. And Yunus is thinking, okay, what's the situation here? The other person says, we have about 800 people enslaved. They work here day and night, taking things from the people that they bring, the robbers, they bring stuff, they separate them, they repackage them, they sell them out, they give them back to them, and they go out and sell it in the marketplaces. And also they're being made to work in labor. They have to do heavy labor. And they're raising these plants and everything. And all the fruits and everything, Baig takes them, and they only get a little bit of it. He says, that life is very difficult. We don't have enough food to eat. We don't have enough water to drink. And we don't have any riding beasts to escape from here. And whoever runs away, if Baig catches them, if Baig finds out, he's always torturing one person or another in the city. And it's very, and then he says, stop, I think somebody's outside. He steps outside and he sees his other friend standing there. I'm keeping guard, nobody's here. Just tell them, if they have a way to leave, they should leave now. So he comes back in and he says, you guys, if you wanna get out of this trouble, if you have a way of leaving, you should leave now. Yunus says, our camels got lost in the desert. I don't know what we're going to do. While he's explaining this, the other person who used to say, do you know the meaning of Kalima Tawheed? He wakes up. And remember what happened with him? He was sick. They were in the desert, and they were inside the tent, and Yunus decided that he was going to read Quran and try to heal him. Remember? And when he put his hands on his head and he started reading Surah Fatiha, what happened to Yunus? Yeah, he had headache. He started seeing visions and he passed out. And in the vision he had seen two armies. An army of Persian soldiers, all dressed in black uniforms. Behind them, there's huge bonfires being carried on these wheeled things. They were bringing it. And they had catapults. They were shooting fireballs at the Muslims. And in front of the army they had elephants. And on the other side you had an army of Muslims dressed in white uniform. And they had their swords, and a man on horse, his face wrapped up, only his eyes you could see. He was saying, okay, Muslims, charge! And they were about to run and fight, and what happened? A fireball came and struck, and people around him fell down. He fell off his horse, and he started saying, La ilaha illallah. He thought he was going to die. But then as he started saying La ilaha illallah, then he had a thought, do I really know the meaning of La ilaha illallah? Do I know the meaning of Kalima Tawheed? And then he decided that whoever I meet, I'm going to ask him for the meaning of Kalimat Tawheed. And when he woke up, after some time, he saw all of his friends were already gone, and out of shock, he lost his mind. And so, he doesn't even know who he is. All he does is walk around in the city asking what? Do you know the meaning of Kalimat Tawheed? So he wakes up, and somehow or other, his face is different. Yunus looks at him and says, I had a vision about you. You were a general in the army. Were you a general? The man says, Kalimat Tawheed. He says, I know the meaning of Kalimat Tawheed. Yunus is like, this is improvement? What's the meaning of Kalimat Tawheed? He says, it's not something I can say. In words, you can tell me a little bit here or there that Kalimat Tawheed means there is no God but Allah, there is nothing worthy of worship but Allah. But the reality of it, the real meaning of it, it's something you feel in here. He says, now I feel it. Now I understand. He says, what's your name? He says, I don't remember. He says, where did you come from? He says, I don't remember. And the man has no idea who he is. Still, he's having that feeling. He doesn't even know his name, but he knows what? La ilaha illallah. Now, there's something interesting. If you don't know your name, let's say for a moment, you didn't have a name. Who are you? Yourself, servant of Allah, right? And meaning of Kalimat Tawheed, really if you understand it, you realize you are a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're here to serve the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this man, even though he doesn't know who he is, he knows what he's supposed to do. And he senses, when he gets up, he looks around, he says, what's going on here? I feel like there is fear in the atmosphere. He says, apparently we're in some kind of bandit village. They have slaves and everything, and we need to get out of here because there's a guy named Baig ruling this town with cruelty. And the man says, Baig, that sounds familiar. Baig. He says, I can't remember. And as they're having this conversation, the other person that was standing guard, he runs in, he says, guys, we have trouble. What's going on? Assalamu alaikum. Yunus, ya akhi, please, come here, sit next to me. Here. Three times. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Everybody, let's make istighfar and ask Allah to forgive Brother Yunus. Ya Allah, forgive our brother. Ameen. He's my brother. I love Brother Yunus. Alright, so, Brother Yunus, can you sit here so you can face me? So what happened? The man walks into the tent, he says, guys, we have a problem. And they say, what's going on? About 12 men are coming towards us and they're armed. The thing looks like the robbers are back. Yunus says, okay, what do we do? Mustafa says, I don't know how to fight. You know how to fight? I don't know how to fight. Right? And as they're worried, then one of them walks in and he says, who are these people? The man, stands up and he's afraid. He goes to the corner and he says, don't be mad. I found him in the desert. I didn't want him to die. He says, you bring strangers into our village. What if we get discovered? He grabs the man. He's about to hit him. Suddenly, somebody holds his hand. And he tries to pull his hand back, but this person is strong. And what happens? He says, I need help in here. Two other of them come in and they pull out their swords. And they see, 3 people here, 1 person in the corner, and this man, his hand is being held, and he lets it go, and the other 2 attack. And this person, who doesn't even know who he is, suddenly can fight with such ferocity, with such force. 3 people come in, then 2 more come in, then 5 more come in, and he's like Jackie Chan, he's like boom, 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 and he's just beating them up, right? And they're all on the ground. And what happens after he beats all of them up? One of them escapes, he runs away. And Yunus says, stop him before he calls more people. And he chases after him, but he gets on his horse and he gets off. And he gets off, and Yunus and they're amazed, like, how do you know how to fight? He's like, I don't know. I just saw this man in danger, and somehow my body just started moving like this. He says, amazing. And they step out and they see those people, they have brought some horses with them. The 11 of them he just beat up, their horses are there. He says, if you want to escape, now's the chance. Yunus says, I think we should stay and see if we can rescue these people. And as they're having this conversation, they see in the distance about 400 or 500 horsemen come up with swords. Yunus says, never mind, let's go get out of here. Right? So they get on the horses and they rush out of there. And Yunus is thinking, man, I was a judge in the city. And I used to, there was no crime. I didn't know there was such a big organization of crime right outside the city. If I get my power back, I'm going to bring justice to this place. And so they start riding, and the horsemen are chasing them. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. And they're riding, and the horsemen are chasing them. And finally, what happens? They get far enough that the horsemen, they give up. Because if you go too far into the desert without food or water, what's going to happen? You're gonna get stranded. But Yunus and his brothers, they're running because they're running for their lives, so they get away. And after some time, what happens? With difficulty, the heat of the sun, they're walking in the hot desert, their horses get tired, they stop and they say, we have to keep moving, we can't get stranded in the desert again. They say, I agree. So they kept moving. Finally, they make it to a small village. They go there, they find that there's a well, people are pulling water from the well, and the well is about to dry out, but there is still some water there. And there are people sitting there and they're saying, how can we survive this drought? We haven't had water in a long time. And they're having this conversation. Yunus, as they walk in, they say, can we have some water? They say, wait your turn in line. They're like, okay. So they're waiting in line and there's like 50-something people holding buckets in front of them. And the well is what? About to dry out. And about 29 or 30 people later, the well, when they put in the bucket, they can't get any more water out. And so the other 20 are like, oh my God, can you go ask the neighbors for water? They won't give it to us. We haven't had, water is in scarcity. And so they're all worried that the water is what? Running out. And can you live without water? We don't even think of it. You go to the faucet, you go, psh, hot water, cold water, whatever you want, right? But in those times, if you needed water, you had to work hard. You had to go put in the well, you bring it out, and you carry it to your house, and for cooking, everything. And you had to give it to the animals, give you a plant, so whatever you had to actually work really hard to get water. And they appreciated water. Now that there's no water, they're in trouble. Yunus says, man, we have no water, we just came from the desert, we're traveling, I'm thirsty, we're gonna die here if we don't get water. What should we do? Mustafa says, I don't know, you stayed with the sheikh, didn't he teach you anything? He said, I remember. He did teach us a prayer called Salat al-Istisqa. A prayer for water. He said the Prophet ﷺ said that when you have drought, go outside with full hope that Allah is going to give you rain. And pray 2 rakats and make the dua asking Allah for rain. And it will always happen if you are sincere. And he remembered, Shaykh told him one thing. He said, I remember though, Musa alayhi salam, the Prophet of God, he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for water on one instant because they are having drought. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, oh Musa, I'm holding water back because of one person who has been sinning for 40 years. And Mustafa and the other person are listening. He said, what happened then? Yunus said, Shaykh told me that Musa alayhi salam, he got up in front of his people and he said, oh people, Allah has held back the mercy. He has held back the water because of one person who has been sinning. And if that person is punished, Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Tell him. Okay. So he says, because of one person, what happened? Allah is holding back the rain. So if we punish that person, we bring him to justice, Allah is going to give us rain. So justice brings what? Rain. Injustice brings drought. And so when Musa a.s. got up and he said, who's that person that has been sinning, that has been doing this sin? Nobody said anything. Because the person is afraid, he knows who he is. He's afraid if I say anything, I'm going to get in trouble. So instead of admitting to his mistake, he started asking Allah for forgiveness. He said, Ya Allah, I made a mistake. I will never do it again. Please forgive me. And as Musa a.s. was like, who is that person? It started raining. And Musa a.s. was confused. He said, Ya Allah, we didn't punish the person yet. How come it started raining? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, oh Musa, my servant asked me for forgiveness. He said, Ya Allah, can you tell me who it was? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, oh Musa, I covered him and I hid his sins for 40 years when he was a sinner. Now that he asked me for forgiveness, you want me to expose him to you? Subhanallah. And so when Yunus started telling the story, the two brothers said, why don't we do that? Let's ask Allah for rain and tell the people here to make istighfar. So they went around telling everybody, ask Allah for forgiveness, ask Allah for forgiveness, ask Allah for forgiveness. Join us here, we're going to pray for rain. So they got together and they all asked Allah for forgiveness and they started making dua. And as soon as Yunus raised his hand, it started raining. And the people were like, wow, who are you people? You've come, you saved us from the drought. He said, it's not us who saved you. Who saved you? Allah. He said, La ilaha illallah. There is no God except for Allah. And nevertheless, despite that, the people, they started treating them like they're heroes and that they're there to rescue them and everything. And after some time, Yunus said, okay, we got our water, everything. Let's go to the city. I have people that I know who can help us there. After 2-3 days journey, they arrived to the city where Yunus used to be judge. And when they get there, they go directly to the governor's office. So they could ask for help in establishing justice in that village that they found. And bring this so-and-so person called Beg to justice. When they entered the governor's city, the governor's mansion, Yunus walks up and he sees that the governor is sitting with a person he has never met before. And the person that was with him, the general, he looks up and his eyes widen. He says, I know him from somewhere. And the governor is, how's he related to the Yunus? His father. Yunus's father was the governor. The governor says, oh Yunus, my son, where have you been? We missed you. And Yunus says, my father, I had this journey, I went, and he says, I'm glad to have you back. I want you to meet one of our great generals that has been assigned to our area. He was in this battle, in that battle, a very, very popular person, a hero in our time. This is your general, Beg. Uh-oh. We're going to stop here. No. Alright, so what we're going to do now, we're going to break into groups, think about the story, come up with whatever wisdom we learned from it today. And we'll continue inshallah next week.